Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Since I do the schedule, I'm responsible for this being 8 o'clock, which is why I had to come at 8 o'clock. You know, it's like, you did it, you got to be there. No, that's not really a reason. There are three reasons why I'm here to introduce my friend Carmine. One is that I know Carmine well. We've been doing a series with Chuck Shelley on Chuck's show for about the last, 3 months, I guess, called JFK 101. And if you haven't been following it, the whole point of that series is to start back at the beginning, start back in Dealey Plaza, and really go through the whole series of JFK events, the investigations, and try to do it very objectively. And Carmine kind of serves as our organizer, our sounding board, the conservative member of the panel. He's the resident skeptic. I'm in the middle of the road, and Chuck is, well, we won't talk about that, Chuck. Okay. But Carmine keeps us straight and organizes. And one of the things that Lancer has tried to focus on for the several years is this is a research project. And if you're going to do research, you need to be critical. A couple of years ago, we had a whole panel devoted to sources and evaluating sources because we're dealing with 50 years plus of a great variety of information. Some of it very credible, some of it, you basically have to challenge all of it. And one of the things we try to do is to take a look back, look inward at ourselves, look at the sources we're dealing with, and be critical about them. And Carmine is going to do that with some of the sources. I have to say, myself, having written a lot and done a lot of research on the psychological effects of memory and memory problems and the real issues that you get with overwriting memory with age, I've about convinced myself that anybody who gives you witness information more than 3 minutes after an event is questionable. No, that's a little radical, but it's amazing how much memory gets overwritten with time. And events get written into an activity. I was fascinated to see the research studies that show that people that write on their observations of an event within 3 years denied that those were their observations because it could not have happened the way they wrote it. It's like, that's not me. Well, yes, it is. It's you. You wrote down what you saw, and now you don't believe it. So anyway, long-winded introduction. Carmine's going to address several of the sources we deal with, give you his evaluations, pro and con, and then you can throw eggs at him because I'll be out of the room. He's a big guy, he can take care of himself. The other reason I'm here is Alan Dale is a wimp. He can't get up this early. Don't tell him I said that. And I am doing penance, okay? I just published a book on UFOs as a national intelligence problem, and therefore I must make up for this sin somehow, okay? Now, I'm dealing with on both sides because the UFO folks don't want to talk to me because I write about JFK, therefore I must be a conspiracy nut, right? Okay, so this is, Carmine, it's up to you. I've done my penance, now I'm leaving.
Well, thank you, Larry.
You all have fun. And I'll be back tomorrow morning at 8:30, more of that penance thing.
Well, let's hope the clicker functions properly. I'm not jumping ahead. So, good morning, everyone. I appreciate the invitation to return to this year's JFK Lancer and ID conference, and I wish to extend my gratitude to Deborah Conway and Larry Hancock. I also want to thank the organizers, the speakers, and the attendees for making this year a successful endeavor. In just a handful of years, it will be the 6th decade since President Kennedy's assassination. While new or formerly suppressed evidence is still being discovered and assessed, so too are others' ideas and stories hanging on the fringes of the case. These stories are similar to official claims that serve agendas but do not provide greater understanding of the facts. Disconnections have occurred in the evidence because of incorrect speculations, mistaken assumptions, and those attempting to manipulate its meaning to the public in service of official and public myths. We can use evidence to verify that officials destroyed and suppressed important exhibits and relevant information, But unfortunately, they are not the only people trying to sway the public. I will offer some of the related documents today I discuss, and all of the verifiable related evidence with additional information and links can be found at my blog at tpac.com, tpaak.com. Yet while the evidence has been offered in several instances, so too have some in the public woven a narrative despite the facts, and each type of myth is detrimental to everyone making progress in the Kennedy assassination case. Unfortunately, what is popular is not always what is factual. Those who seek to deal in myths never approach us directly or logically, because they would quickly be exposed if vigorous standards of evidence were employed. Instead, some approach us as if they were spies, victims, living in fear, or relentlessly sought by dark forces. These are the myth makers, who seek everyone to believe a grain of truth mixed with improbable tales. Some rely on your sympathy and hope you are unfamiliar with their claims. Others might have formerly been officials, and in some cases desire your frequent monetary donations for doing largely nothing. These myth makers will attack and raise all manner of suspicion and allegations towards anyone who defies their claims with evidence. Instead of reasonably admitting the flaws of such tales, a myth maker usually doubles down on speculation and accuses those who doubt of having a nefarious agenda, because empty accusations are what they bring to the table. There is no real controversy, they just lack evidence, and since they cannot appeal to reason without it, they attempt to incite others and claim victim status. Since the time of Aristotle, reasonable standards have existed. Regardless of a subject, discerning the reliable from the unreliable, the Greek philosopher states, "For if a proposition be true, all the facts harmonize with it. But if it is false, it is soon found to be discordant with them." When a story does not harmonize with the verifiable facts, there is no reason to support it, no matter if the myth is an official or a public one. Such ideas and misrepresentations of evidence further prevent our chances of finally reaching some important answers. We already must contend with time robbing us of verifiable witnesses, related officials, and experts. Yet we further must endure some largely unverifiable witnesses and self-proclaimed suspects emerging over time as well, all while officials and critics seek to undermine and discredit any ideas beyond the official findings. Consider that we must simultaneously attempt to piece together and decipher mixtures of speculation, evidence, and myth. Some of the mythical ideas can gain traction, and unfortunately, some have. These tales do not seek to prove their narrative, but strictly enforce it by seeking to silence any who dispute their claims, even with substantial evidence. Thus, using the very suppressive methods officials do, they attempt to stifle both conspiracy critic and advocates who are skeptical. Similar to official deceptions, the myth makers have become a threat to reasonable and credible investigations of the case. Looking out across all those gathered here today, I see that many people who likely have spent significant amounts of time, money, and have the noble desire to learn a greater historical truth based on facts. Some here have dedicated large portions of their lives to providing evidence and seeking to offer historical perspective and whatever portion of justice that can still be had. Yet others elsewhere seek instead to benefit themselves and their narratives at the cost of the facts. They seek to be rewarded for making grand claims and for proving nothing. Often, they attempt to mask their myths and unverifiable claims and endorsements, yet never provide the evidence required to prove their stories. Lee Harvey Oswald, despite the claims of some of the President's Commission advocates, enjoys the presumption of legal innocence without a trial. But so too do all the other people blamed in the narrative of various mythmakers deserve the same presumption. This conference provides a necessary forum to researchers, witnesses, experts, and supporters to exchange ideas and evidence. Some are now gone, but we carry the words and the evidence they can no longer speak. We too bear a responsibility to represent accurate and reasonable ideas, to set aside the myths and the stories, but though they may burn with popularity, they actually illuminate nothing. They do not enlighten, but merely fulfill emotional desires to deprive their supporters of the facts. Myth makers do not just knowingly misinform, but they also would replace the unknown truth with their imitation of truth. Demonstrating the verifiable problems in official and public myths requires testing them against the legal evidence. Pardon me for a moment. Suit's a bit hot, I ran around the block. Yet others elsewhere, so as I said, this conference provides a necessary forum to researchers, Demonstrating the verifiable problems in official and public myths requires testing them against the legal evidence. If there is not sufficient evidence for a claim, it should be then set aside until such evidence is offered, or it can be reasonably dismissed as a myth. Setting aside the official and public myths allows us to reduce the number of possibilities, leading us closer to the verifiable facts. While no inspection by officials or the public is likely to be perfect, we shall never advance the case if we eternally debate long disproven theories and current unverifiable hypotheses. It does not matter who misleads us and to what purpose the deception is aimed. It is a deception. These myths are a threat to reasonable discourse and greater understanding and should be exposed. To achieve a reliable consensus based on verifiable evidence necessitates that we maintain a healthy skepticism of any unverifiable story, no matter who offers it. Today, I present 6 myths, 2 official and 4 public stories in the related evidence. Oh, sorry, you already had me. The first claim is a long-standing assertion that militant organizer Joseph Milteer was present in Dealey Plaza. A balding older man with similar glasses was spotted in the enlargements of photography capturing the crime scene. He is, according to some, Milteer, and thus goes the tale, if he was present, he was involved. However, what decisive evidence has ever been offered to prove the man claimed as Milteer? Little beyond speculation is what I was offered by proponents of the claim. Thus, I began a search for what evidence might exist that could answer this long-standing question. After searching extensively through some related FBI files, I was able to learn that not only could we locate Milteer, but he was also under FBI investigation and observation across the nation as he traveled to meetings and conducted fundraising events. On November 23, 1963, an FBI informant at the Union train station in Jacksonville, Florida, spots Joseph Milteer at approximately 4:25 p.m. Milteer was reportedly happy about the president's death, claiming he was not guessing when he stated the president would be killed in a similar manner. Yet beyond his boasting and claims, no evidence ties him directly to a plot, and his location in Florida largely precludes his ability to be in Dallas, Texas, roughly 1,000 miles from Jacksonville. This would require nearly 15 hours of nonstop driving, and based on the evidence, Milteer did not just make stops to eat and sleep, but he also went to meetings in other states. While he was in Texas during mid-November to raise funds, he was not feasibly in Texas on November 22, 1963. Additionally, there are 2 documents reporting the ongoing surveillance of Joseph Milteer in late November. The first document states, following the assassination of President Kennedy, Milteer, because of his known association with hate-type organizations and his previous threat regarding President Kennedy, was immediately considered a suspect. However, our investigators determined he was in Quitman, Georgia, his home, on 11/22/63. The second document is from the U.S. Secret Service, who was informed by FBI Special Agent Charles Harding, who contacted their agent in Thomasville, Georgia, who immediately ascertained that J.A. Milteer was in Quitman at the time of the assassination. The House Select Committee study used photographs of Milteer from prior and following the assassination for analysis. HSCA experts concluded the man was not Milteer, but an unidentified spectator. Despite general similarities in facial configuration and age, the unidentified man has facial differences and is partially bald, while Milteer has a full head of hair in photography years after the Kennedy assassination. Evidence proves that Joseph Milteer was a possible suspect, but confirms he was in Georgia and not Dealey Plaza. If we are to locate the responsible parties, we must clear the untenable leads from the path to progress. The next feasible tale is more recent. The first incarnation of this claim was offered by former music producer Bob Vernon on behalf of Truth, Truth, Truth Incorporated. Vernon, while appearing before the Assassination and Records Review Board in 1994, offered the story of William Robert Tosh Plumelee. Vernon states Plumelee testified to the Senate regarding the prior Iran-Contra scandal. Thus, his post-1970s connections to the Central Intelligence Agency have some credence to them. However, he also made claims about the Kennedy assassination. Plumelee claims that he piloted a CIA abort team to Texas the morning of the assassination. He claims this abort team was sent to prevent the president's assassination, implying unnamed people in the CIA had planned the assassination, and others in the agency now sought to prevent it. He also asserts that Mafia hitman Johnny Roselli accompanied him and he later dropped off Roselli at Garland Airport in Texas. Vernon continues asserting it was his group's intent to provide the ARRB with all the evidence they possessed that would prove these assertions, yet beyond claims and unverifiable items, this evidence has never been produced in over 2 decades. Evidence to the contrary and challenging Mr. Plumlee's account, however, exists in abundance. I decided prior to investigate Mr. Plumelee in the days before and after President Kennedy's assassination to ascertain his location and if he ever did pilot a flight with Johnny Roselli in 1963. In 1959, police arrest Plumelee in Ohio for attempting to pass a forged check. He served 60 days in a workhouse and during his incarceration told special agents of the FBI Cincinnati division that a man named Larry Allen, located in Miami, flew ammunition to Castro forces in Cuba. Plumelee claimed he also flew a plane and was paid $900 by the same man. He then states later being unable to contact Allen and arranged through one Johnny Smith to fly another plane to Cuba, but halfway to his destination, he turned around and abandoned the plane in a field. When federal agents attempted to question Plumelee again to clarify his statements, he stated he could not remember any dates or times for these events. Agents noted during the last interview, Plumelee told a very, quote, confusing, illogical story with a complete lack of specifics, and that he has indicated that he had in the past used his imagination for the purposes of making his story more believable. In that, he has admitted to making up names of persons allegedly contacted by him. Those interviews were just a scant handful of years before the Kennedy assassination, and it's notable Plumelee was reportedly already creating stories in the legal record. During June of 1963, he was again passing multiple bad checks to various merchants and was arrested for abandoning another rented plane in May. Plumelee also contacted the FBI and claimed that he was running guns to Cuba and gave them unsolicited information about his latest associates. He subsequently is arrested for check forgery again. While later incarcerated, Plumelee claims to have secreted thousands in cash. He tells the FBI that he has money in a local locker. Plumelee also tells local authorities the money would help him prove his claims. He directed a local sheriff to the locker in question, but when the locker was opened, it contained a pair of binoculars. The Miami FBI office lists Plumelee as a chronic complainant. A report states that Plumelee made similar gun-running claims multiple times in the past that were proven false. On June 18, 1963, he tells federal agents he wants to talk to the FBI about his Cuban connections, but he, quote, can't, and then he later refused to discuss the matter further. Plumelee never offers verifiable evidence of his assertions, just the repeated and varying claims. On July 10, 1963, Plumelee is incarcerated in Palm Beach, Florida. The CIA conducted internal checks regarding Plumelee in their main general files, the Domestic Contacts Division, and in the files of the Office of Security. Not a single document was offered or has emerged to support Plumlee's claims of being involved in official anti-Cuban activity in 1963 or any time preceding the assassination of President Kennedy. While indeed much later files support a more recent connection to the Contra affair, they do not support his claims in 1963. The same year he is repeatedly arrested, a notable unreliable source of information, and cannot even get away with writing bad checks. His multiple arrests and being jailed just months before the assassination, his lack of funds, and unbelievable claims that drew official notice do not make him a likely choice for a clandestine mission. While Plumelee and others claim all the related files were destroyed, there was no reason to destroy the files of a minor criminal figure repeatedly attempting to mislead or associate with officials. The entire reason we can verify and set aside different claims Plumelee makes is due to officials not destroying the files on him. The absence of files describing his improbable tales do not suggest nefarious action, but rather there were no files to destroy. Just as we should not accept the pronouncements of officials without substantial evidence, we should not accept the mere word of anyone who makes unlikely claims without substantial proof as well. Among the most convincing evidence that no flight occurred are the prior legal statements of Johnny Roselli and William Tosh Plumelee himself. Roselli had been under Federal Bureau of Investigation surveillance for months before and following President Kennedy's assassination. In the days before the assassination, Roselli was visually tracked between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, where he registered and was seen days before. There is no evidence that has been offered to support he was in Texas, but at the Desert Inn Hotel in Las Vegas. Tosh Plumelee himself was also interviewed by FBI agents in 1976 regarding his past criminal activities and associations. During the interview, he offers associations with Roselli, but expressly states, quote, he did not see Roselli from 1963 to 1968. This would preclude any last-minute flight. And since he has not yet begun circulating his later claims, he then had no reason to be deceptive. Consider the unlikely nature of his claims. If the CIA or a rogue cell had assassins on the ground, they would not need to send an abort team. They simply could communicate to their local contacts, field agents, or informants to do so. They could make a phone call to avert the plot without including additional people that might compromise it. There is no need for a last-minute flight with someone possessing no connections to the agency at that time. The Plumelee story of a flight includes at least one person that verifiable evidence supports was never in Dallas or with Tosh Plumelee. There is no reason to entertain his claims when Plumelee himself in the legal record has already discredited them. The next improbable tale regards Everett Howard Hunt, an infamous CIA officer with close associations in more than one failed paramilitary operation pursued at the behest of higher officials. Hunt is the subject of a decades-old claim that he was one of the 3 tramps arrested in Dealey Plaza based on a, quote, striking resemblance to the photographed men. This claim has evolved over the decades to include far too many people, and various newly asserted tramp suspects have gained popularity. Hunt testified before the Rockefeller Commission that he was not in Dealey Plaza, and he had 2 witnesses supporting him and repeated this denial at subsequent legal proceedings. Yet, he later, during a health scare, changed his story and embraced once legally denied claims. When Hunt recovered, he omitted the later changes. Reporters, according to a legal transcript, told former agency employee Victor Marchetti that E. Howard Hunt was present in Dealey Plaza. Marchetti testified in the trial of E. Howard Hunt Jr. versus Liberty Lobby and revealed his sources to the questioning attorney. Yet these sources gave varying tales of how his information came to be in their possession. During this trial, when E. Howard Hunt was questioned about his location on November 22, 1963, his answer was found to be inconsistent. Hunt claimed he was with family that day, but his later trip with family did not account for all his activities. Many, based on Hunt's reputation, believe that if Hunt was lying, it meant he was in Dealey Plaza. As the story evolved, many assumed the CIA's silence on the matter to imply that Hunt was an important part of the conspiracy. Yet this is not the case. The CIA had many reasons for maintaining silence about various important matters. One reason is for plausible deniability. If Hunt was verifiably involved, the agency would learn it from his personal records and distance itself from him. Prior declassified internal files revealed that agency officer S.D. Breckenridge collected information secretly about the agency's offices of finance and any file he could find on E. Howard Hunt's location, November 22, 1963. The Office of Finance conducted verifications on travel or leave Hunt undertook, and it discovered he was stationed at agency headquarters and had only 11 hours of sick leave during the entire month of November and no annual leave in 1963. Hunt also had not traveled during that time, according to the verified evidence. The Office of Security was able to locate Hunt, and based on the formerly classified documentation, he was not in Dealey Plaza. Additionally, the House Select Committee on Assassinations conducted a thorough photographic inspection, and its experts found Hunt did not possess the facial traits, age, or matching characteristics of the man identified as one of the tramps. A related Senate Select Committee summary offers various allegations, their sources, and some official replies to the claims. The document states on November 22, 1963, E. Howard Hunt, who was a case officer in the Directorate for Plans, Deputy Director for Plans Richard Helms, later Agency Inspector General Lyman Kirkpatrick, and Cuban exile Enrique Harry Williams met in Washington, D.C. to plan the backing of Cuban invasion troops that were training in the Florida Keys. As Hunt's internal records, the photographic evidence, and the witnesses support, Hunt, based on the verifiable facts, was in Washington, D.C. on November 22, 1963, yet he was not where he claimed to be in the city at all times. Hunt, we now can verify, was dishonest in protesting he was only with his family. And that day, Hunt falsely also claimed to be on annual leave, which the agency's documents refute. Eventually, Hunt would later make public assertions that he was not part of the Kennedy assassination, but a bench warmer. This, like his other evolving claims, have no basis in verified evidence. It is feasible he was pursuing financially beneficial deals for himself, facing possible death. Once recovering, he ceased to repeat the story, but it has echoed in the public ever since. Among the various public myths propagated that claim to be the key to the Kennedy assassination, there are common factors. The most enduring myths seek not to enlighten or to offer evidence, but to entice our interest and generate feelings of sympathy. Some wish for us to be without our skeptical faculties and disarm others by offering them a tale meant to soothe the very real doubts that should exist regarding some claims. Simple questions are rebuffed. You are told to read the book or watch the movie. Or in other words, you need to believe, and they have no verifiable evidence to offer. They have endorsements, like sports teams. They have believers who will call you all manner of things because you dare to doubt, but they have no evidence to prove what they repeatedly claim. This is an insurmountable problem if we seek actual progress. Mythmakers do not. They seek an audience, preferably an audience without standards of evidence. They cannot solve the case or even move it forward. They can, however, waste decades of time, publish waves of unproven and discredited claims, attack those who will not buy into the myth's orthodoxy, and then claim they are the victims of those who oppose them. Some do not want to prove anything. They want to claim they have answers, offering scattered pieces of information mixed with tales, no verifiable fact support. One such mythical figure is Judyth Vary Baker. Baker has for decades claimed to be the virtual Rosetta Stone of the JFK case. She asserts being the secret mistress of Lee Harvey Oswald for a few months in 1963. That alone is quite a claim, yet for Baker that's not enough. She also claims without a formal college training or scientific accreditation by any recognized body that she was part of a biological cancer weapon plot developed for use in the Central Intelligence Agency's Castro assassination plots. Baker claims that CIA informant Dr. Edward William Alton Ochsner was in charge of this asserted bioweapon project. Yet Ochsner's name never appears in any of the verifiable evidence related to the Castro plots. Baker claims officials wiped all mention of the purported Ochsner plot from the record. Yet why should officials remove an unimportant person like Ochsner from the record and not people with verifiable links to the CIA? People like former Director of Intelligence Alan Dulles, Chief of Western Hemisphere Division J.C. King, Director of Security James O'Connell, and Mafia notable Johnny Roselli. She expects us to believe that they would not remove the name of so many highly placed officials and a notorious criminal, but make sure to scrub the name of William Ochsner? The more her tale evolves, the more unlikely it becomes. Another large problem is formerly classified official documents regarding the Castro plots never mention any cancer bioweapon as claimed by Baker. Officials did attempt to use poison, chemical agents, explosives, and various other exotic methods to assassinate Castro, but no biological cancer weapon is ever mentioned. Dr. Ochsner's name is never associated with the Castro plots because Ochsner was a willing informant to the CIA, but never associated with assassination plots. Baker has attempted to mold him to her purpose despite the substantial evidence disproving it. Evidence instead reveals that Dr. Ochsner was a willing informant and that he supplied the CIA with medical information and materials he gathered from conferences abroad. His information focused on material from Soviet-controlled areas. Ochsner was also credited in the press with being the first to discover Lee Harvey Oswald's communist tendencies. Thus, if, as Baker claimed, a clandestine operation was underway, why would Ochsner later publicly implicate someone Baker claims was instrumental in the plot? It makes no logical sense to do so, and it risks exposing the plot to the public with these actions. Additionally, Baker claims on page 5 of her book, David Ferry, that Ochsner's purported Get Castro cancer plot began in March of 1962. Unfortunately, the Central Intelligence Agency drafted a formerly classified internal memo stating Ochsner was merely an intelligence source on Soviet medical information and personnel. It also states Ochsner's last personal contact with the CIA occurred on January 8th, 1962. This is months before Baker's claim of a Castro cancer plot. and not a single piece of verified evidence supports it. Her major claim is demonstrably a myth and unworthy of anyone's belief. With the Ochsner story disproven by evidence, there are no verified reasons to believe her purported connections to Mary Sherman and to the CIA Castro plots. William Alton Ochsner and Judyth Baker had nothing to do with the Castro plots verifiably. It is no mere coincidence. Baker's name never appears in the related official record. There is also no reason for the CIA to lie internally about the last contact with Ochsner at the time. There were Castro plots ongoing in 62 and 63, but Judyth Baker had nothing to do with them. She has attempted to insert herself within an implausible narrative. When problems are voiced, Baker and her supporters often ask, "Have you read her books?" As if a book could somehow repair the damage the facts have rendered upon her myth. Indeed, I have read her books and compared them to substantial evidence, and her books do not survive the process. All but the shallowest inspections of her myth reveal a bad romance story seeking to replace the facts. There is no greater danger to the facts than popular or enduring myths that manipulate the feelings of those affected by them. Official and public myth makers who push their wares, despite the facts, are impediments to progress. They draw not from the substantial evidence that exists to present new verifiable ideas, but a desire to impede anyone in conflict with their claims. Myths can possess impressive endorsements, but they still lack the necessary facts. Ignoring them will not stop them. Publicly asking them to account for themselves with substantial evidence is the only way to expose their flawed nature. Among the most often associated in the press with the assassination of President Kennedy is a particular gentleman who endorses the official narrative of the case and has been similarly compared to Priscilla McMillan Johnson and offered his less than unbiased assessments, Mr. Hugh Aynesworth, who was a reporter for 70 years, according to the Press Club release on him. The Dallas Press Club statement calls him a witness to history in Dealey Plaza during the assassination of President Kennedy. He is noted to have, quote, plied his trade in newspapers, magazines, and broadcasting. The Press Club also regards him as being diligent and tireless in his pursuit of any, quote, truth to all the conspiracy rumors behind the JFK assassination, established him as an authority on this unique and tragic moment. However, this reported authority, who some call unbiased, is not the pillar of impartiality and accuracy some would contend. While indeed there are some reasonable and verifiable people doing good work, there are others too, who are merely a seeming tool of those who seek to blame Lee Harvey Oswald without definitive evidence and without a demonstrable motive. And a few notables among them offer the worst ideas as representing all of our ideas, even those with substantial evidence. The question is why? Why does Aynesworth so consistently deny any ideas or inferences of conspiracy, no matter how much evidence supports them? I would contend it is not merely his professional skepticism, but perhaps a deeper influence helped form his ideas. Often, many have long speculated that Aynesworth might have some official connection, and now we have evidence to demonstrate it. A document I came across in the Central Intelligence Agency files regarding the Garrison investigation is a message from the director of the Domestic Contacts Service regarding James Walton Moore, a CIA officer who had contacts with Aynesworth. The document states J. Walton Moore has not seen much of Hugh Aynesworth since October 1963. In addition to discussing with Aynesworth the, quote, possibility of a trip to Cuba, as described in a former memo of October 10, 1963. Aynesworth expressed some interest at that time in possessing employment with the agency. He was given the name of a personnel recruiter covering the Southwest, but so far as is known, has not made contact yet. Thus, we can now consider his prior relationship expressing interest in agency employment, and ironically, Hugh Aynesworth, one of the very people who asserted Oswald seeking a trip to Cuba was nefarious, was also considering a trip to Cuba on behalf of the CIA. The agency further describes Aynesworth as, quote, Aynesworth is considered a good reporter, although with a tendency to interpose his own beliefs, and sometimes perhaps lacks objectivity. An understatement. Officials considered him a Warren Commission man. Indeed, Mr. Aynesworth has for decades expressed a desire to repeat official pronouncements, yet the reason was not substantial evidence and merely journalistic investigation, but also was due to a prior conversational relationship with the CIA, and he considered joining them and going to Cuba for them. Aynesworth further corresponded multiple times with the FBI during the Garrison investigation, and he stated Garrison was losing his sanity due to the case disintegrating because it was a complete farce. Aynesworth provided nearly 20 pages of information to the Bureau about his allegations and investigations regarding Jim Garrison. Again, we can see Aynesworth is contacting officials to report what information he could with his particular view of things. While officials state they believe Aynesworth did not respond to their prior offer of employment, he was still providing the CIA and connected individuals information as late as at least 1967 regarding the Garrison investigation of George Brown of the Brown and Root Company, whom also cooperated with the agency. I suppose he certainly was diligent and tireless in providing officials whatever information he could to suppress ideas and contend evidence of a conspiracy. He was a reporter and a contact to both the CIA and FBI on multiple occasions. Aynesworth claims to be a supporter of the truth, but his, quote, truth relied upon quiet relationships with officials that sought to prove his ideas and silence public skepticism. His enduring support of the official agenda, despite the evidence, reveals that he was not interested in assessment of all the evidence, but merely that which supports his presumptions. Aynesworth claimed in one subsequent interview he never took a penny from any federal organization, but he certainly did offer repeatedly to serve as their source and contact. When 20-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald defected to the Soviet Union on Halloween of 1959, he stayed in a local Moscow hotel. Reporter Priscilla McMillan Johnson recounted a tale of meeting Oswald based on the advisement of a council official in Moscow. Johnson was living at the Hotel Metropole, and this is the same hotel Oswald decided to reside at following his arrival in Russia. Mrs. Johnson interviewed the recent defector and described him as a, quote, a nice-looking young man who spoke quietly, but she later claims that despite his manner and appearance, that his words later struck her as violent. Johnson also claims he was either very courageous or very foolish. He struck her also because of his youth and seemed lost in a situation that was beyond him. Years later, Johnson would conduct a series of interviews with Morena Oswald while writing her book Morena and Lee that was released in 1964. Johnson would also make several appearances in the press promoting her book that largely assisted the unproven violent narrative officials repeatedly offered about Lee Harvey Oswald. She stated Oswald beat his wife over inconsequential things and false accusations, which is supported and contended by other witnesses. Yet she also purported that Oswald threatened to kill Morena if she told his brother about the abuse. Morena has not mentioned this in any evidence to my knowledge. No threats by Oswald to kill her have come to the forefront. She does claim his improbable attempts on General Walker and Richard Nixon that lack evidence, but not herself. These, I would contend, are further brushstrokes by Johnson, employed to build her speculation upon these asserted violent but quiet calm of Oswald in Russia. Seemingly, if we believe he would kill his wife for arguing with him, he would do much worse to others. However, there is no significant evidence of this murderous rage and the death threats she alleges. Among Johnson's comments by Morena are some that contend the unknown motives offered by various officials after the President's Commission failed to establish a motive. Morena is quoted stating that Oswald, quote, liked Kennedy, he liked civil rights, he disliked him for the Bay of Pigs invasion, but insofar as he ever spoke about Kennedy, it was to praise him. He suffered, as Morena did in the summer of 1963 over the death of the Kennedy's baby. Both he and Morena took this very personally, according to Johnson. This is quite a bit of sentimentality about a man and his family who officials would months later allege killed the same man. However, there is far more to Priscilla Johnson's claims than a concerned journalist, Some researchers and conspiracy advocates have prior noted the details and evidence Johnson repeatedly provides seem only to support official claims and paint Oswald as a psychologically disturbed and violent person. For decades, her book and articles have been offered as credible investigation and commentary that supports the claims of officials and advocates of the government's allegations. Many prior reasonably claimed Johnson has a less than neutral stance, and some claimed her connection to officials was far greater than ever publicly admitted. These doubts about her were correct and well-founded. Among the new documents released by the National Archives this November is one that sheds additional light on the motivations influencing Johnson's actions and her later advocacy of government claims targeting Oswald. House Select Committee staff researcher Bob Gensman offered notes that reveal information from Johnson's CIA 201 file. The document featured and shows several redacted names, but states on April 28, 1958, 1 year prior to meeting Oswald, Johnson was a traveler and informant for the Central Intelligence Agency. The officer dealing with her stated Johnson would be receptive to their officially redacted proposal. In May of 1958, officials proposed Johnson for clearance as a legal traveler. She also agrees to attend a briefing at the U.S. Embassy prior to her departure to the Soviet Union. December 11, 1962, officials contact Johnson and sought her as a viable candidate to compose an article for a major U.S. magazine designed to support their operational objectives. Based on her repeated service to the CIA's goals, officials assess that Johnson, quote, can be encouraged to write pretty much the articles we want. She makes contact with a redacted CIA employee in March of '64, then befriends Marina Oswald, and she spends months interviewing her to write her later book on the Oswalds. She continues to be a witting asset and has meetings, calls, and exchanged letters with unnamed CIA employees multiple times in 1964 and '65. Johnson, based on the recent evidence, is a willing contact and traveler and part of the CIA's foreign operations to gather intelligence. She is verified to be a source of intelligence for the CIA years prior to meeting Lee Harvey Oswald. Priscilla McMillan Johnson wrote a book casting him as a violent young man she portrays with little regard for American values or human life. Yet these feasibly were not her unbiased observations offered to the public, but additionally the agency too used her for several matters because she could be counted upon to deliver the answer they desired. I would contend this evidence disputes some of the assertions offered by Johnson, which are not impartial reporting. Some who support the official allegations still repeat her claims, but these historical defenders of Priscilla McMillan Johnson might wish to reassess their prior beliefs and review her now verifiable CIA connections. Thank you.